Hi class, right now you are learning about the 5/7 of 5 chord, and in this video I want to talk about the part writing that comes with it. I'm going to discuss first how this chord is resolved, and then I'm also going to talk about how we approach this chord. Much of this is very familiar to you from resolving 5/7 to 1, but there are a couple new things that we need to talk about with this particular chord, so let's get to it. Let's take an example in the key of G major. We have 5/7 of 5, resolving to 5, and they're both in root position. The chords are A7 and then a D chord for the 5 chord. In terms of our voice leading, this is very much like going from 5/7 to 1. And as you recall, in that situation, we very easily could have parallel fifths and other issues. So what we did then was to make sure one of the chords was incomplete and the other is complete. Well, we're going to do the exact same thing here. In this case, my A7 chord happens to be complete, root, 7th, 5th, 3rd, which means when I resolve to the 5 chord, it's going to be incomplete. Let's take a look at how all of that works. Let's take each pitch separately. The raised 4th scale degree is the temporary leading tone that tonicizes the 5 chord. And that C sharp is going to resolve up to the D by half step, just like our regular leading tone would. Here is the chordal 7th. This is the 7th of the A7 chord. That will resolve down by step. And the last note, the E, must resolve down by step to triple the root of the 5 chord. If you took this up to A, we would have a nice complete 5 chord, but we would also have parallel fifths. So we will leave out the 5th of this 5 chord and instead triple the root. And I know that looks funny on a 5 chord to have a tripled root and 1/3, but remember, this 5/7 of 5 has temporarily tonicized this 5 chord, so it feels like a very local 1 chord for the moment. An alternative to that is to make the 5/7 of 5 chord incomplete. In that case, we leave out the 5th of the A7 chord and we double the root. So we have a 7th, and a 3rd. No 5th. This will allow us to resolve to a complete 5 chord. Let's take a look at that. The leading tone, C sharp, still resolves up to D. The chordal 7th resolves down by step. And the doubled root, the A, is allowed to stay on that pitch as a common tone and fill out the 5 chord. Students often don't think about building this 5/7 of 5 incomplete, but that's actually a really great way to go because it allows for a complete 5 chord. Let's take a look at a different scenario. In this case, the 5/7 of 5 is resolving to a 5/7 chord. The 7th is in the 5 chord. So we're going from A7 to D7. This does present a new voice leading issue that we haven't talked about yet. Let's take a look at how we handle that. In this case, the temporary leading tone, which is Phi, does not resolve up to the D like it did before, but instead it resolves down by half step to Fa, and that is the 7th of the 5 chord. The chordal 7th still resolves down by step as it always has. And finally, let's mention what happens when these are inverted. Very often the 5/7 of 5 chord is in first inversion, which puts Phi in the bass, and it creates a really nice half-step motion as it resolves up to 5. When these are inverted, both chords can be complete. You don't have to omit the 5th from either chord. So you'll notice here the A7 is fully complete, the leading tone resolves up to So, the chordal 7th resolves down. And when we get to the 5 chord, it too is complete. It's only when they're in root position like they were before that we have to start omitting the 5th from one of them. Let's talk a moment about the approach to the 5/7 of 5 chord. This secondary dominant can be preceded by a number of chords. Sometimes it's the tonic. It could also be a 2 chord. Quite frequently, the 4 chord approaches 5 of 5. Because this chord has a chromatic pitch, there's the potential of what's called a cross relation when we go from this chord into this. Let's talk about that and how to avoid it. So what is a cross relation? You're looking at one right here, and there are 2 things happening simultaneously that cause this problem. First of all, we have an altered scale degree, which is Phi, and then in the previous chord, we have the diatonic version of scale degree 4, which is Fa, that's not a problem yet. The problem is when those two pitches are in different voices. So we have a diatonic version of scale degree 4 in one voice, the soprano in this case, and then in the next chord, we have a chromatic version of that same scale degree, but it's been transferred to a different voice, which is the tenor. That is a cross relation. So how do we avoid this? There are a couple ways. Let's unpack that. Here's the most common solution to this issue. We approach the chromatic pitch by the diatonic version of that pitch in the same voice. So we allow the soprano, for example, to go from C to C sharp. So the soprano is just moving up by half step chromatically. That's perfectly acceptable and by far the most common way to handle this approach to the secondary dominant chord. There is one other way to avoid the cross relation, which is rather elegant. This is called a chromatic voice exchange. As you can see here, the tenor and the soprano are exchanging pitches. The tenor starts on an A and goes to C, while the soprano starts on a C and goes to A. And we've seen this before diatonically, but here the C is transformed into a C sharp. And this solution is acceptable to composers, even though it appears to be a cross relation. It's done in such a way that we find it acceptable. This could happen with any pair of voices, and sometimes the bass, in fact, is one of the voices doing this chromatic voice exchange. And I'll just close by saying that not every chord that comes before the 5 of 5 has the diatonic version of 4 in it. So sometimes the cross relation is not even an issue because this might be a G chord. If it were 1, then that's really not anything to be concerned about. It's only when this chord has Fa in it, which happens quite a bit. We see a lot of 4 chords and 2 chords that lead into this. So that's something to look out for. Okay, that is a quick rundown of how to resolve and approach the 5 of 5 chord. Thanks for watching.